We are being hailed, sir.
On viewer.
You have one chance.
Hello, welcome to Star Trek Sodium. This week we have Star Trek The Next Generation Series 3, Episode 7, The Enemy. A story about Geordi LaForge falling down a hole on a planet, and the only other person who can help him is a Romulan, who's also stuck in the same situation. When watching The Enemy, those of you with eagle eyes probably noticed that Deanna Troi keeps her back away from the camera at all times. That's because when Brent Spiner had heard a funny comment from the Riker actor, he allegedly spat his milk out when he laughed, and it sprayed all down the poor actress's back by mistake. She was of course fairly annoyed with the situation, as she didn't have a spare costume and filming was about to begin. The only situation that they could think of to solve it was that she had to keep her milky back away from the prying eyes of the camera. This episode features the first appearance of Andreas Katsulas as Commander Tomalak, who would go on to make 4 appearances in Star Trek over the next few years. Even though Andreas Katsulas plays the character, other actors that also auditioned included the Columbo actor Peter Falk, Marky Ramone, Donald Pleasance, who unfortunately withdrew interest because he was making one of those awful Halloween sequels, Bill Spaghetti, Rolf Harris, and Sudanese Jack. It was at the time of making The Enemy that the Worf actor brought his celebrity singer girlfriend, Debbie Harry, to the set of Star Trek to watch him doing his acting. The problem was that Debbie was a big Star Wars fan, and in the 1980s you either liked Star Wars or you liked Star Trek. As the acting played out, she was seen huffing and puffing at the side of the studio, as if she was waiting for everything to finish, so she could get the hell out of there and go home, perhaps to watch Return of the Jedi, or maybe The Caravan of Courage.
On the other hand, Galland and Kor would provide ideal cover for the opening move of a new offensive.
In his memoirs, the Star Trek producer had recalled the time when the crew had arrived to film the episode and discovered that a homeless had moved in and was living behind one of the panels on the bridge of the Enterprise. A cleaner had noticed that one of the panels was slightly open, and upon looking, she reported to Michael Piller and Rick Berman. Now behind the panel, they discovered a stained blanket, several empty liquor bottles, wrappers of cheap food, and a loose human leg. Whoever was living there had clearly been here for months. When Lever Burton read the soapy script for The Enemy, he supposedly had flashbacks to a tragic time in his life, when his cousin Tim had suffered the same problem, falling down a dark hole back when they were teenagers, growing up near the Windy City. Young Lever had seen Tim leaning over the mouth of the well, perhaps to try and see how far down in the well the water was, when a reluctant gust of wind blew him over the edge and he toppled in. Lever ran, but he was unable to stop the curly-haired youth from falling. Luckily, the situation was simply rectified with some neighborhood rope, but the mental torture had been set in place for poor young Burton. It wasn't a bad time for everyone at the studio, though, despite all of the turmoil that was going on. It was Wil Wheaton's 16th birthday party celebration. Michael Piller possibly allowed Wil Wheaton to use the Enterprise set as a venue for his birthday party. Even with Michael Piller's blessing, Rick Berman was deeply unhappy about the situation and made sure he stayed at the studio to supervise the party. He would stand there, telling everyone off all the time, making sure that no one put their greasy KFC hands on the shiny bridge displays, and making sure that nobody dropped any crumbs from the party food. Party guests included Fred Savage and Corey Feldman, who would go on to say that they were so annoyed with Rick Berman's dour attitude that they would never appear in Star Trek, no matter what. Now, on the last day of filming, the Riker actor reportedly arrived at Studio 9 after having a fight with some tough Hollywood biker gang members. He wouldn't tell anyone what happened, but he had told Chief O'Brien actor that when he accidentally spat a mouthful of burger onto one of the bike gang's bikes, trouble immediately ensued. He came into the studio nursing a bad swollen elbow, and he had bruises on his face, which were thankfully concealed underneath his face's man-beard. This was the week that Gates McSomething's boil on her forehead finally discharged its crucid contents. She was thankfully facing the camera to her left while filming, when she shouted her line of heated dialogue and the boil burst on the right side of her forehead. It ran down her cheek but was facing away from the character, and she bravely managed to finish the scene in some degree of pain and frustration. By the time she'd finished filming the scene, it had quickly crusted over due to the hot studio lights, and so was easy for her to pick off and remove, and eventually clean. Patrick Stewart's waxwork was finally unveiled at the Hollywood Wax Museum, and the Captain Picard actor was delighted to visit to see how it had turned out. When he entered the museum, though, he allegedly was faced with a bizarre mix-up. The Patrick Stewart waxwork featured a long black hair ponytail by mistake, but the nearby waxwork of action star Steven Seagal was suspiciously bald. The ignorant waxwork makers had mistakenly mixed up the hair section of the models, and they weren't able to work out how to fix them for several months, as they had been commissioned to create new models of Hulk Hogan and Janet Jackson, the singer. Nebulous Star Trek producer of the future, Alex Kurtzman, would cite The Enemy as one of his favourite episodes of The Next Generation, but he would also admit that he'd only actually seen 2 episodes of Star Trek Next Generation in total as of 2019, and he thought that after watching just 2 episodes he'd learned everything he would need to know about Star Trek. Well, thanks very much for listening to my facts, and hopefully I've taught you everything that you need to know about Star Trek, especially about the episode The Enemy. Like the episode if you like it, leave a comment if you want to leave a comment, and subscribe if you want to do that. I like it all. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it. And I'll be back soon with lots of very interesting videos coming up. And I'll see you then. So ta-ta!